But yeah, so thanks very much for having me, and welcome to people in the room and also online. Yeah, so I'm Clara Barker. I collect roles like Pokemon, if I'm honest. So at the moment, I'm the LGBT. No, I'm not. I'm the Inclusion and Diversity Representative to Council for the Institute of Physics. I'm on the Royal Society's Equality and Diversity Committee. And then, yeah, I have a fellowship with the Daphne Jackson Trust and the Royal Society of Chemistry. I get around with the different science organisations. My first degree was an engineering degree. But I'm a material scientist. That's what I do. I'm not going to go too much into the science, but, you know, remembering people first, and that's what we do. So I don't, you know, for some of you, this might be very obvious, but if we think of carbon atoms, we can put them together in different ways. And if we do that, then we get very different materials. So you can put them together in one way to get graphite, which is sort of soft and dark material, or you can put them in another way and you can get diamond, which is very hard and transparent and a little bit bloody. But so what we can do is you can sort of play Lego with atoms, and that's what we do on a day-to-day basis. I also I make thin films in particular, so thin films are everywhere. I started by getting into working on shop floor, similar to what I saw outside, making the metal for the inside of crisp packets. And thin films, you know, they're on our glasses. If there's anti-reflective coating or anti-scratch coating, they're everywhere. But they also have these really beautiful plasma glows, depending on what material you're using. The colour of the plasma changes. So I used to dye my hair like to match the plasma that would be a really big fan. I just can't be bothered with the upkeep anymore. I'm just getting too old for it. But you know, every so often. So I'm going to share a little bit of my backstory, a little bit of where I came from. So I grew up on a council estate in North Manchester, and I'll be honest that on my street, more people went to PRISM than finished school. That was sort of the sort of area I grew up in. It wasn't a great area, and it was quite rough, and I was sort of the weird kid. But I was also smart. I was sort of, you know, a little bit intelligent. So my mother wanted the best for me and my sister, so encouraged us, and we went along and did lots of entrance exams for local sort of schools. And so I got a full scholarship to go to Alderham Grammar School. Back in the day, I went to the boys' school. You know, we got it wrong, who knew? Times were different then, but they've actually now merged. But yeah, so I went to Hume Grammar, which was a really good school, but it was interesting because everyone knew I was the poor kid. Everyone sort of knew that, they could tell. And then I was the weird kid. You know, I found metal and goth very early. Punk came a little bit later. So that I already had that going on. But then I also just sort of knew there was something different about me as well. I knew that there was something weird, and I couldn't tell you what it was because at the time I had 4 TV channels. There was no internet. You know, and we had landlines and things like that. So it wasn't like I could get much information about LGBT people. We just used to see stereotypes on TV, and that was it. So yeah, I grew up when we had Section 28. So that was, you know, effectively you couldn't talk about being LGBT in schools and in public places. It didn't specifically ban gay teachers, and yet a lot of them got fired. I know when I spoke to a lot of them. That's why I'm a little bit concerned about what's going on when it comes to trans people and the rights that we're talking about in the UK right now, and of course in America and other countries. So, you know, that's what the law is, but it has other implications. It meant that I couldn't figure out who I was. I had no one to talk to. I love it when I go in schools and I do talk to them. Like, it was illegal for me to do this when I was at the school. That's really cool. But I love that, right? So yeah, I just didn't really know what was going on, and so, you know, my mental health didn't do very well, weirdly enough, with all this going on. And I ended up actually dropping out of school before I did my A-levels because my mental health was not in a good place, and I just wanted to sort of get on with things. So I spent a few years playing around. I was doing different things. A lot of years as a lifeguard and swimming teacher, and then a few years managing a nightclub in Manchester and DJing and stuff. So, I mean, don't get me wrong, I was having fun while I was depressed. But, but you know, it's that real balance. After a few years, I realised that I wanted to sort of get back into education. Turns out that actually lifeguarding and managing a bar both include mopping up messy toilets and things like that, amongst other things. So I was ready to move on, and so I actually got myself on a foundation course I did an engineering foundation course at Manchester Metropolitan University. I did get offered a place at UMIST, which is now part of Manchester University, but I was wandering around going, oh, it's dead stuffy here, I'll never fit in. So it's hilarious. I've been in Oxford for 10 years. But yeah, so I went to Mannet where it's a bit more chill. And then I started working for an engineering company that put the metal on the inside of crisp packets to keep them fresh. And that was really good, and it was really good fun. And I really enjoyed the experience, and I really got on with my managers. But you know, at the time there was open sexism on the shop floor, there was open racism on the shop floor, there was open homophobia. I, had a little bit of a dyed streak in my hair, so I just got all the gay jokes and everything, and there was a lot of jokes about me being trans as well. And it's like I wasn't even out at the time, but there was just, this was the sort of environment. You could also smoke on the shop floor at that time as well, so different time. I worked there for a gap year. It was quite good. I ended up being in charge of their biggest ever machine in Japan, finishing off the project there. And then I went and finished my degree, and they offered a job, and they said, what do you want to do? They literally created a job for me, which was really cool because I'd sort of gone off script a little bit during my gap year. And I really enjoyed that. So I went back, but then I got offered a PhD back at Mannet. And my manager was really good. He said, look, we don't want you to go. We've just created a role for you. We want you to stay here. But you would be foolish to not take it. You would be foolish to not do it because it's ideal for you, which was good managing. I really enjoyed that. So I went back to Manmet, and I did a PhD in material science, material engineering. And I had a blast with the science. It was really good fun. From there, I went and I worked as a visiting researcher in Finland, and then I got offered some postdocs in Switzerland where I went next. But during this time, I was still sort of pretending that I wasn't trans, because by this point, there was a bit more information. We had more TV channels, and we had the internet, and I realized who I was, and I knew who I was, but I was really stuck because it's like I was doing really well. I had a really good career, and I didn't want to lose that career. But at the same time, I knew that for my own mental health, I needed to transition. I needed to be myself. And so I actually made a decision, and I thought, right, decision is I'm going to choose me. I'm going to choose my happiness and my health. And so I made all the moves to leave science. I was out in Switzerland for 4 years. I started medically transitioning out there. And I decided to I signed up for a foundation course to switch to a conversion course to go into another field. So I had a big plan about, that was it. Because by this time, I wasn't really enjoying my time in the lab, not because of the science, but because of me and who I was hiding and pretending. And I started to fall out of love with science, and I thought I didn't really enjoy it. So, it seemed quite easy to leave science behind. So I left. Unfortunately, just the last couple of months before I left Switzerland, I was able to claim unemployment benefit. And I knew that I'd signed up for this conversion course, but I still had to apply for jobs. And I went to Oxford, and I went to this interview because I had to, do relevant interviews. And I went there, and they were asking me questions like, what are you good at? What can you do? What are your skills? How would you deal with this? They didn't care about this completely weird, baby trans goth kid with a My Little Pony on my handbag. They didn't care. They were just asking me skills, and I'm like, oh, they were really nice. If they offered me the job, I'll have to take it. And that was not on the script at all. And sure enough, they did offer it me. When they rang up, I thought they'd got the wrong person. They thought I was haggling, and I got more money. Hey, that's pretty good. But it was completely accidental. So yeah, and then after about sort of 7 years after about 5 or 6 years, I realised actually, what, I do love science. It was just all the other baggage that I didn't like, and so I was supported to get a return to research fellowship, which is what the Daphne Jackson Trust does. And it was really nice. The Royal Society of Chemistry, I'd been doing events for them for years, and the first opportunity to put their money where their mouth was, they did. They sponsored me at the first opportunity, which is really good. They really did value it. So yeah, so for the last 3 years, I've been back in academia, and I'm loving it. Of course, I'm planning what's next, but you know, that's academia, unfortunately. So yeah, what a journey. Now I won't go into these too much because I'm keeping an eye on the time and I put way too many slides here. But with science, and I think maybe we'll hear a bit more about this, you know, with science, we're always told there's no discrimination in science. It's meritocracy. The best will rise to the top. So it's sort of weird that, you know, if you're a black academic, you're less likely to become a professor than if you're white. If you're female, you're less likely to become a professor than if you're male. And it's the same with, well, when it comes to disabilities, 20% of the population disclose disabilities in the UK, and yet we're talking about 7% in academia and STEM. So the numbers are a bit weird. And then there have been some reports from funding bodies, such as the UKRI, that showed that, for instance, women are less likely to apply for large scientific grants, and they're less likely to get them. And then there was a similar report for race, and there was a similar report from the Royal Society on disabilities as well. Less likely to apply and less likely to get. So there's a lot of attrition there. When it comes to the LGBT scientists, there's been a few studies, there's not been loads, but there was one by the Royal Society of Chemistry, Institute of Physics, and the Royal Astronomical Society, which just rolled off the tongue. But they did this in 2019, they released this report, and it showed that LGBT people were twice as likely to consider leaving STEM, the STEM workplace, as non-LGBT people. Trans people, 20% of the trans respondents were actually considering leaving often, compared to 16% of non-LGBT respondents considering leaving sometimes. And that means a lot to me because I was in those numbers. This report is actually going to be, we're actually just going to redo this report. So there will be a follow-up. And when it comes to STEM, it's interesting because we've got all these numbers and we've got this data, and yet we still have pushback. We have people in very, very large platforms who are saying, oh, there's no problem with diversity in STEM, no problem. The previous Minister for Equalities, that she said in Parliament, oh, well, women just don't want to do physics. They're not good at physics, which was really helpful and a surprise to the 3 women physicists who were stood in front of her. But, you know, it's quite open and we're quite happy to talk about this. And I sort of wonder why this is. And, well, I wonder why we're allowed to do this. This is one thing. But why are people sort of pushing back? And I always used to say equality is cake. It's not cake. There's plenty to go around. Don't worry about it. There's loads of equality. But when we're talking about jobs, when we're talking about job roles, when we're talking about funding, turns out that there is a limited amount of that. And right now there's another sort of difficult time. So if certain groups are more likely to get a slice of the cake when it comes to funding than others, what we're talking about is sort of addressing that balance, making it a little bit more equal. But if we improve the chances for underrepresented groups, then some people suddenly have more competition than they used to have. So you can understand why there's a pushback. Not that it's good. But here's the thing, when we're doing this, it's actually sort of academics and scientists that are pushing back against the scientists who say, no, we've got to start believing in people. And it's very easy to dismiss us. But then we're also seeing just a general pushback. So this is removing the credibility of science and academics. And that's peeling through because now we're starting to see a lack of belief in science. A quarter of people in the UK think that COVID was a hoax. 3 in 100 Britons think the Earth is flat. Only 3, don't they know it's flat? But yeah, so yeah, it's, you know, we're getting this pushback and we're just sort of discrediting scientists, but then we're also discrediting scientists as well. And it means that in the United States, a lot of companies are suddenly rolling back on their DEI initiatives. I know people who used to have a profile on NASA and now they don't because they were removed. So we've got to keep an eye on this. Now, I'd love to say that, you know, why should we? I think we've actually already had it summed up really nicely. But I do always look to the financial sector because they're just awesome, groovy people who spend millions on Pride each year, sponsoring buses and painting the buildings. But it does also turn out that, you know, if they have better diversity in their workforce, then they make more money as well. But I think that they're just doing it because they're cool and awesome. It's not just because they're making a bit more money out of it. I'm really glad to see pushback from some of the learning societies like the Royal Society pushed back. Don't read this, but they actually sort of pushed back and say that we need to invest in people and science. And it was great with the Institute of Physics have recently launched a Physics Inclusion Award, which is not just looking at gender, it's like an equality marker, and they're looking at all characteristics. It's not because gender's been fixed in physics, it's just that they realise that people are intersectional and that there are other characteristics as well. Right, I should probably hurry up, but why did I think I needed to leave STEM? So I'm just sort of going to go through this list, but there was open homophobia and transphobia. There were biases from the people that I worked with. And to be honest, I had biases myself. I'd been told that there was something wrong with me by the government. And so, of course, that sort of bred in and I had that baggage. I was always pretending when I was at work. I didn't see anyone like me. In fact, when I was leaving science, I'd been in STEM for 15 years and I'd not met any LGBT, well, I'd met 2 gay people, neither of them were trans and neither of them were material scientists. So I just didn't see representation. And yeah, I just felt like I was always pretending and hiding who I was, which just meant that I didn't have the bandwidth to do my work, really. Afterwards, what changed? Nothing really changed. I changed my clothing, I changed my name, but that didn't really affect my work. But all of a sudden, I could be myself. I just felt free. I just felt like the weight had been lifted. Most people didn't really care. Don't get me wrong. Some people had offered me jobs and all of a sudden they were off the table. Like there was some pushback, but not much. Most people didn't care. And over time, it turns out there are other LGBT people. I'm not the only trans in STEM. Through things like the LGBT seminar, Pride in STEM, PRISM was one that I heard about very early on and was doing great work. And you know what was most important? I became way more productive. All of a sudden, I'll be sat in the lab and I'll be like, I just want to get this last result. It's 10 o'clock, maybe I should eat. No, one last result. I recommend work-life balance, but I'm loving what I'm doing. But I do worry about being challenged. And of course, with all the current bathroom bills that are potentially being introduced, and I have to worry about that. Hate crimes against trans people in the UK are on the rise again, they always are. And I also have to think about travel. There are a lot of countries around the world where it's not safe to be LGBT, and that's nothing against the people from those countries. I know some amazing, awesome people in those countries, but you know, around Europe, there's a new prime minister or premier, or whatever, in Poland who says that he wants to get rid of LGBT people in Poland. Hungary have removed all the recognition of LGBT people. 2 years ago, some of my friends used to be able to have Pride in Turkey, and then the year after they were shot up by the police and arrested, and that happened again this year. And these are awesome people, but you know, and there are a bunch of countries where it's actually illegal and punishable by death to be LGBT. I got invited to a conference in one country, and it's like, no, at best I'm going to get deported, you know, and that might, well, yeah, I won't even get let into the United States anymore. So, but my life would have been easier if I wasn't trans. It would have been, you know, a bit more straightforward. But I've had so many amazing opportunities that I wouldn't have got otherwise, and I love it. That's why I love doing this. I've been, every so often I'll get sent a picture of myself, a drawing by someone that's like, we want to put you in this kid's book, and I'm like, sure, cool. So I've got loads of drawings of myself from kids books. I think I'm in 4 kids books now. I did an interview for a girls' lifestyle magazine, in their words, where I was talking about being an engineer and being trans. I've even done a TED talk about my life. I went to a pride party at Downing Street a few years back, a couple of prime ministers ago, let's put it that way. And Transport for London, they actually put out a tube station where they replaced all the tubes with engineers, and I was on there, which was cool. They didn't actually put any of these up. I did have a look around, but I guess we don't want to upset the tourists because that would be confusing. One thing that is cool though, so for all this, I often talk about being LGBT and stuff. Last year I did a TV show where it was just, you know, sort of 8 minutes, but I was talking about the physics of light. But that was real inclusion, because what I was doing there was I was a visible trans person, but I wasn't talking about being trans. I was just talking about physics. And so that was awesome. That was like, that's what I want to see. That's what we need. We talked about future leaders. Claire talked about future leaders. We've been talking about future leaders for 10 years. why haven't we done it yet? We're still talking about future leaders, but that's real representation, and that's so good. Realizing that I've gone over time, I will just, this is my final slide. So this is a fusion reactor. So fusions have the nuclear power, and it's what we're trying to bring because it's a good, green, clean way of producing energy. Trouble is, we can't really do it yet. It doesn't really work. So JET held the record for a long time for a fusion reactor. It produced 16 megawatts of energy, but it consumed 24 megawatts of energy to do that, which isn't great. But nowadays, we've started increasing that. We've started to improve this. JET just got retired and it is on its way. And we actually had a plasma that was sustained for 22 minutes just this year. So we're starting to get towards sustainable fusion because we don't want our laptops to just power for 20 minutes. So this is great. ITER is the next generation. So we're building that now. It's taken about 20 years already, and it's going to take at least another 20 years before we get results, before we find out if it works. We've put in about $40 billion so far into fusion. We've put all that time, we've put all that energy, we've put all that resource into fusion because if it works, it's going to sort of transform how we produce energy for the future. But we don't know whether we push someone out of science who could have solved some of these questions earlier because of their gender, because of the colour of their skin. We don't know. But if we're going to invest in our science and we're going to invest in our engineering, then we need to make sure we're investing in our scientists as well. And we've got to treat our scientists in the same way we treat our science. So with that soapbox, thank you very much.